Flowers from Arch Street Meeting Friends of Philadelphia. I'm introducing our speaker this evening, Pamela Haines, an active member of her Quaker meeting in Philadelphia, is passionate about earth, relationships, integrity, paying attention, and repair of all kinds. As a writer, workshop leader, and speaker, she loves to demystify the connections between economics and daily life, challenge people to claim their power and act on their values, and call them to wonder and thanks. She has published widely on faith, money, and economics, and on peace building and right relationships. Lead author of For the Right Relationships, Interest, Debt, Growth, and Security. She has also written a Pendle pamphlet, Waging Peace, Discipline and Practice, a book, Money and Soul, 2 books on poetry, and a collection of essays entitled That Clear and Certain Sound. Pamela, I'm turning it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so thinking about right relationship with money, my understanding is that you folks were also interested in thinking about investment. And so I wanted to start with the question of what is investment? And it seems like at root, it's putting our resources into something in hopes of a return. And of course, we can invest in many different ways and places. We invest in people, our families, our children, our friends and colleagues. We invest in our bodies. We invest in our communities of place, of faith, of common interest. We invest in our work. Some of us invest in our soil. I really love my compost. We invest in infrastructure, transportation, energy grids, water systems, houses, and appliances, with the hopes of getting the best value over the longest time. We invest in our values, in the causes, social causes we work for, and how we vote. They're really all of a piece, all part of deciding how to put resources into what's important to us, with the eye toward creating more of what we value. So I wanted to start putting our money decisions, kind of creating that larger picture that can fit into. And in practice, most of our investment decisions are fairly narrowly framed, with a goal of getting a financial return that will help meet specific future needs. And for individuals, that's most often old age security. It helps to remember that individual saving for retirement is a pretty recent phenomenon. I have to say, I learned a ton about this process in the process of co-writing Toward a Right Relationship with Finance. So I'm leaning on the work that we did on this book. I learned that old age security has been handled in a variety of different ways over the course of time. Traditionally, of course, it's been done mostly within families. There's recent examples in recent centuries of larger group insurance systems, kind of with the rise of the Industrial Revolution. Then with unionization, with good unions, came employer pensions. And then this was supplemented in the US in the 1930s, more recently by Social Security. But it's really only been since the 1970s that a model of the individual being responsible for saving money for an individual retirement account came into existence. And that only for those who have the means. So in a way, the situation that we're in is an aberration, part of a larger economic ideology that holds up wealth accumulation by individuals as the highest good, with public well-being as a distant second. But here we are. So how do we bring our values to investing for security? I think the heart of this project is building up all the non-monetary aspects of security, building strong family ties, creating communities of caring, developing satisfying lifestyles that don't require expensive maintenance. But if we're going to talk about the larger picture, the picture of money, I want to start foundationally with listening for what rings true. And I go back to John Woolman, and there's Lois mentioned the other book that I've been working on, economics, money and soul. And in that, I note a quote from him. It says, John Woolman advises us to dig deep, carefully cast forth the loose matter and get down to the rock, the sure foundation, and there hearken to the divine voice, which gives a clear and certain sound. So my journey on this listening and digging and listening for what rings true, this process, has kept nudging me toward economics as a deep root of much of what we struggle with in this world, and toward money as the center, or as the tap root of that system. So I'm going to read just a little bit more from Money and Soul, which is kind of frames a series of meditations on economics and money within the Quaker testimonies. What rings true in the messages we get about ourselves as actors in our economic system? Much of it has a distinctly tinny sound. We need more stuff. Greed is good for us. Selfishness defines our essential nature and is the building block of a healthy economy. Advertisers help us secure the products that will make us happy. Well-being is most accurately measured in financial terms. Competition brings out the best in us. Going for the roots, where can we hear the ring of truth in ideas about what the economy is for? Is it for steadily increasing the power of the wealthiest, maximizing profits by eliminating jobs that people need, convincing us we need things we are better off without, stripping the earth of resources and diminishing its ability to sustain life? Surely not. So this brings me to a lesson from theologian Walter Wink. And Wink suggests that every secular institution has at its heart a divine vocation. I love that phrase, a divine vocation. He notes that many of these institutions have strayed, and he challenges the church to call the institutions back to that divine vocation. So if we were to take up the challenge from Walter Wink, a big faith question would be, what is the economy for? And the answer would have to be something about providing the community with the means of sustaining life. And then if we ask the question, what is money for? The answer would be something about easing the process of exchange. And here's a question that I really, really love posing. What if we thought of money as a public utility? Public utilities kind of deal with things that everybody needs and make sure that everybody has enough of them. What if we thought of money as a public utility? Our current money system is something that is quite different. It's much more like a private commodity. Not very many people realize that over 95% of the money in circulation in this country is created by private banks when they make interest-bearing loans. Our coins and dollar bills make up, about 5%, but that vast majority is created by private banks with the understanding that they believe that we're going to be able to pay back the loan and the interest, and they record that intention, in our account and in their books. So the dynamics of the system have several deeply problematic outcomes. Since receiving interest gives lenders more, while paying back interest leaves debtors with less, inequality steadily grows. The fact that our country is awash in great debt at the bottom and enormous excess at the top is not a coincidence. They're the flip sides of that same debt interest reality. And then needing ever more money to pay back not only the principal, but the interest on our loans is also one of the drivers of a growth economy that's exceeding the limits of planet Earth. Worse, investment for profit is increasingly focused on financial instruments that produce more money rather than enriching the real economy in a way that meets human community needs. So people are putting their money into instruments that make more money rather than into any kind of productive activity. So in the midst of these challenges, there's some exciting new public conversations about money in the economy. There's more and more conversation about funding a just energy transition through public financial institutions. There are ideas about holding our common assets in public banks rather than in the big for-profit banks. I could talk about that a lot. I'm active in our local Philadelphia Public Banking Coalition. And then there's the idea of the government injecting money directly into the economy, as was done with the Reconstruction Finance Corporation in the 1930s and 40s. That was the institution that kind of brought us out of the Depression and through the war. So as we think about bringing our faith values into the economic arena, there are many opportunities. I'll just read a final quote from this book. In a minute, if I find it. We need hope to imagine a new future. For many of us, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than a new economic system. I'm just going to read that one more time. For many of us, it's easier to imagine the end of the world than a new economic system. And this is a lethal failure of the imagination. The world needs people who can exercise their imagination muscles, weave new realities from the most insubstantial of threads, be able to say, this is real, even when nobody else around can see it, and to act on that reality. We need to practice stepping with confidence and hope into the unknown. I just want to take a moment here to pause. There's a lot of ideas here, and I'm going to keep on talking, but let's just pause for a moment for you to see if anything wants to settle in your mind or rise up as a level of a question or comment for later. So, thinking a little bit about investment and integrity. So investment starts with the assumption that we have extra, that we're deploying resources that are not needed for daily life in pursuit of enhanced welfare. And this comes with just a minefield of integrity issues. Having more than we need is already problematic when so many people have less. And yet our fears of not having enough in the future in this highly individualistic society are real. And we could consider that since we have not worked for the interest, it could be seen as unearned money, maybe not our money. If we're managing money on behalf of others, like a meetings endowment, we have to navigate potential conflicts between fiduciary responsibility and faith values. And we find ourselves reaching for love, connection, and meaning within a system that's full of the lures of greed, temptation, and materialism. We're caught in a global tangle of poverty and excess, and money has become unmoored from its reason for being, to promote the general welfare. So there's a lot of tangle to find our way through, and it really needs to be a common endeavor based on clear values, or our attempts can so easily become perverted by greed. Just think of Midas and Mammon. If we can detach from the concept of ownership of money and think of it as less as a possession, more as a tool or a utility, we could begin to develop a vision of a different kind of money system. Our current financial system can seem a lot like the smoke and mirrors of the Wizard of Oz: compelling, powerful, impossible to understand, impossible to impact. So what if we could imagine a money system that's more like water, something that flows through a local economy and can be used over and over again? In that vision, its properties would not be thin, arid, theoretical, and fast, as in the international derivatives and currency speculation. Rather, they would be thick and rich and slow and real. And I do think of compost again. So let's just take a pause here. So as we think about moving forward, I think we get to, there's kind of four things that we do. First, we tend to all the non-financial aspects of our security: our relationships, our communities of caring, our resilient lifestyles. Then we root ourselves in this big picture of kind of the way our financial system currently operates and the kind of vision that we have for how it could operate. Then we acknowledge all the people in our country, not to mention the world, who are living paycheck to paycheck and don't have savings to put by for the future, and put at least some of our energy into supporting policies that help secure a future for everybody. This might mean protecting and strengthening Social Security, curbing predatory lending, increasing the minimum wage, shifting the burden of taxation from taxing labor to taxing money made by money. And so my perspective is that only then, with all of this context, can we, in good conscience, turn to the question of our investment portfolios. Now, a simple way to start with bringing our values is through investment screens. And I imagine that most of you are familiar with this concept. Traditional Quaker screens are for alcohol, tobacco, weapons, and gambling. And our biggest Quaker investment group, Friends Fiduciary, has added for-profit prisons, coal, and then more recently, all fossil fuels. Secular, socially responsible investment funds tailored for individual investors like Calvert, Domini, and Pax World have similar screens. I just came across the website As You Sow, which may be a useful one for screening around such values. More and more funds, Friends Fiduciary included, are considering not just products for screening, but corporate practices related to environment, human rights, labor relations, and equality in employment. These are sometimes abbreviated as ESG, or environmental social governance. While I'm not aware of a Quaker investment fund for individuals, the Mennonites have Everence and the Lutherans have Thrivent, both of which have strong negative and positive screens and more. And I think Everence may be the gold standard here. I won't speak definitively. So when we think of investment, our attention tends to go to the rate of return, the interest, and the use we'll put our returns to. But it seems increasingly important to be thinking about the principle, the fund of money that is being invested. After we've screened out for what we don't want, this remains a relevant question, both for individuals looking for funds to invest their savings in, and for meetings or other organizations with endowments. As our money is making interest for us, how will it be used? And how does that use support our values? Historically, there's been an almost total disconnect between how principal is invested and how the interest is used. So no red flags would go up, for example, if a foundation's funds were invested in highly profitable mining industries in order to give the interest away to support clean water projects. But this disconnect is being increasingly challenged. A growing number of funds are using some of their principal, their endowment, in pursuit of their mission, making low or no interest loans to organizations whose work aligns with their values. So they may have a little less interest to give away outright, but they're putting more money overall into the projects they care about. It's been interesting to me to talk with some folks from our committee that supports grants for Native Americans in our yearly meeting. And they're currently investigating whether putting some or all of the principal of that fund into a Native American run loan fund might increase their overall impact. And Trenton Friends Meeting has set aside a portion of their endowment principal for loans to projects in their immediate neighborhood in the city of Trenton. There, the returns they're expecting are not of interest, but in making a positive impact in their community. And there's others as well, Green Street. And actually, I don't know about our street. So here's some queries on aligning our investments with our testimonies. I thought of 4 of them. So the first one is about bads. Screening out bads may be the simplest step in aligning our investments with our values. Are there other bads besides the most common ones in both products and practices that we would want to screen out? There are funds that focus instead on actively investing in goods like renewable energy or low-income housing, so that the capital is being used not just to produce the interest we count on, but to support activities and products that align with our beliefs, usually with a somewhat lower return. So how do we balance a focus on investing in goods and a focus on maximizing returns? Third query. Friends Fiduciary has a strong track record in shareholder activism. So how do we balance the opportunity to influence a flawed company versus the opportunities to support a company that more strongly aligns with our values? Finally, considering the issue of risk, how confident do we feel that the assets we've invested in managed accounts on Wall Street are secure? What keeps us from considering a different set of risks? What makes it hard to depart from what we know, even when what we know is flawed? Then there are other, even more innovative places to put money. So here's some things that I've heard that people in meetings are doing with their money in response to needs in their community. While these would certainly not maximize interest rates, they might address the larger issue that we started with, increasing our shared security. So some meetings are paying off credit card debt of family or faith community members at a lower interest rate. Some are paying off student loan debt at a lower interest rate. Some are providing mortgages to family or faith community members. Some are buying housing and renting it to those who are unable to afford a home on their own. Some are loaning money to a local co-op business to finance expansion. So they kind of go from a little bit simpler to considerably more complex, but they're all ways of thinking freshly about how to invest with the idea of strengthening community and building shared security. So in conclusion, I would like to suggest that if we could keep the big picture in mind, and if we were free of fear and constraints, where would we like our money to be? Working to accomplish what end? And how might we take a step in that direction? If we'd been in person, I would have suggested an exercise. Or I was thinking, what if we each got 100 pennies and a paper with concentric circles? Then the question would be, the first question, if we could choose freely where would we most wish to invest the income that we're setting aside for future security? How many pennies would go in that inner circle of our immediate family? How many would go in the next one, maybe of our faith community? How many in our wider community, our neighborhood, or our city? How many to particular issues that we hold dear: renewable energy, racial justice, international development? And then I would invite us to consider where those 100 investment pennies are actually going. Where might we substitute some other kind of return for interest? What more can we do to rethink what constitutes security? What small steps can we make to better align our investment with our deepest values?
You were talking about the public bank, but before that, you were also talking about investing in the family. I'm thinking, are you talking about things like paying for your kids' college education? Are you talking about a family putting extra money into a stock market fund? Like, what kinds of examples can you recommend?
I think at the very beginning, I was talking about providing them with a strong foundation, which might have nothing to do with finance. Paying good attention to them, being respectful and encouraging, hanging out with them, kind of being really, really good parents. I mean, that's an assumption that we do that kind of investment in our children, that the rewards will come back many-fold in many different places. So it's like trying to think outside of the assumption that our investments are financial. Like investing in relationships in our community strengthens the community in a way that allows more resilience. So the non-financial investments is what I was reaching for, to establish that as the foundation, and then we add financial as maybe the. It's hard to in this world. It's hard to say that it's less important, but it's a different kind of investment. I think we often, our minds go straight to the money, and there's a lot that isn't monetary that deserves our attention.
Yeah, I was really struck early in your talk when you referred to John Woolman, because in the last year, I read a lot about John Woolman in preparation for a talk, and I learned that from a young man, he worked and he earned money, but as he was formulating his philosophies, this is how I read it. He gradually weaned himself from spending his time earning money into doing those acts which he thought would further the common weal, which would benefit everyone. And so it was the biography was a very clear example to me of choice and choosing not to earn money when it was no longer essential. And of course, we all know that John Woolman constantly made it unnecessary for himself. That is because he was living a simpler and simpler and simpler and simple life, and that's what he was all about. So that, in my mind, money is linked with choice and time, and John Woolman was a perfect example of that. But what I want to say is that we see this among lots of people today. For example, the grandmother who stops working so that she can take care of her grandchildren or assume duties in order to let her own children better themselves. And also the wage earner, the man who decides to stop working so that he can devote himself to those things that really enrich himself and others. And we see constant examples of that because it's all a matter of choice. So, money is so inextricably linked to time and to choice. And John the Woman was a perfect example of that in my reading of him. And it's an example that's lived out every day to some extent by people all around us, don't you think?
I think that's beautifully said. Yes. Yes. The one thing that I would just highlight is what you said about the grandmother taking care of the children and the value of the caring economy that is often not valued in our current system because there's not money attached to it. And so how to step out of that assumption that money is equal to value. And what you said about making choices, I think that's, yes, thank you.
Pamela, you were going to tell us about the People's Bank.
So public bank, I'm not sure if anybody is aware that we have an example of a public bank in the United States. It's now 102 years old, North Dakota. Anybody heard of the State Bank of North Dakota? Oh my goodness.
No.
It was started by progressive farmers when all the power was in Minneapolis and the farmers just weren't being able to get decent prices for their goods. And so they swept into office and established a bank which would hold the taxes, the public assets of the state, and then invest them back into the state. And then the progressives got swept out of office and the conservatives came in and they tried to dismantle everything, but they looked at the bank and they thought, bank, maybe we'll keep the bank. And so the Bank of North Dakota has stayed all of this time, and it holds all of the tax money of the state, and then it loans a lot to community banks throughout the state. There's more community banks per capita in North Dakota than in any other state in the country. And it loans to students for student loans, and they have the lowest student loan debt of any other state in the country. So there's an example of a bank that's working in the public interest. Nobody's ever heard of it, but actually some people have heard of it. So this movement for public banking, actually the movement for public banking was launched at Friends Center, the national movement, in 2012, I believe. And I was there, I just couldn't stay away. And so there's campaigns around the country. There's been a really big campaign in California. I could tell you a story about how that got started. And in Philadelphia, we've been working on a public banking campaign for the last maybe 4 years. And council overwhelmingly passed legislation in March to establish an authority to set it up. We need a state charter to start a bank. But and now we're having some difficulties with the administration. But the idea is that our tax dollars could be held by a public entity and loaned at low interest into the community rather than being held by private banks that then invest in a way that maximizes their profits. And then the loans could be recycled, like if you loan to somebody at a low interest rate, but then you get the interest back to be able to reloan it. So it's a pretty exciting project, and I could answer more questions, but that's the short answer there. The idea that those are our public dollars, and why can't, oh, I know the other thing that I wanted to say, that if like bonds, when you raise bonds for infrastructure projects, it turns out that the cost of the interest just about doubles the cost of a long-term project, like a 20 or 30-year bond, that about half of that money goes to interest, or it costs twice as much because of half of the money going to interest. And for example, in Philadelphia, the school district in, I think it was maybe 2019, paid $370 million in interest alone. That's interest, that's money that's flowing out of the city to the private banks that hold those loans. So, you know, what if that money weren't kind of bleeding out of our economy, but we're able to stay here locally to address real needs in the community?
How do we help? I mean, this sounds like something we should be protesting for or doing something.
Yeah, we're working on but if I get your email information, I can add you to the list of folks who get that in the alerts. So maybe, I don't know, maybe Lois, you can help me get contact information from people.
Certainly.
Yeah, I think we probably all are interested, because this is just, yeah, this is great stuff.
Pretty exciting.
Really.
Yeah. We have a really good group. There's one person in our group who was the legal counsel to city council for many years. And we have one person who has really deep financial expertise. And then we have other people who are just steady, hard workers. And I played a role of writing, of drafting letters to the editor and getting various different people to put them in. So there's this kind of steady stream of letters over the course of the last year in the Inquirer saying, we want this really makes sense. So different people are offering different resources to that campaign. And it really strikes a lot of nerves, and people really get the idea, why can't we have some control over our money?
Oh,
You said that some steps have already been taken in Philadelphia?
There's legislation on the books, but it hasn't been implemented by the mayor yet. So
When you say legislation has been put on the books, is there a name for that? A name of the bill that we could contact our city council?
yes, but I don't have it in my head. So that's why we need to, it's got like 5 or 6 numbers in it. I mean, I could look it up, but I'm not sure that's the best use of our time. But I'm delighted at your interest. One of the things that I really like about the public banking movement is that it allows people locally to address the really big issue of control of money at a local level. It's easy for it to be very theoretical. You know, why isn't the whole system different? But this is a place where people can begin to, it's a little wedge that you can get engaged locally. So I'll tell you a story. I'll tell you the story about Los Angeles because it's such a great story. So there were fossil fuel divestment youth activists in Los Angeles who said our city shouldn't have its money invested in fossil fuels. And that a resolution passed city council, and they looked around for a bank that they could put their money in that wasn't invested in fossil fuels. And there wasn't a bank that was big enough to handle Los Angeles, their money. And so the city council leader said, well, let's have a referendum whether we should start a public bank. And so they were set up with like in 3 months, there was going to be a referendum about whether Los Angeles wanted to start a public bank. And there was there's no infrastructure to do the campaign. So these activists, these divestment activists, ran this incredible grassroots campaign. They went to hundreds of organizations to get their endorsement, and they reached out all over the place. They got really a lot of pushback from the major newspaper, but they got, within 3 months with no budget, they got 400,000 voters in LA to say, we want a public bank. And it was not enough to win, but it was enough to create the momentum to have a state law that was passed saying, let's let's investigate how we can set up 7 banks within the state. And now there's different locuses of activity all over the state.
Wow.
Isn't that exciting?
Have they done any? I mean, are any of them started? Are they active?
Well, we're neck and neck with San Francisco. We have this little friendly competition about who gets one first. So it's new, and there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be done. But it's coming. It's coming.
Can I ask you something that I know the answer to? Can you very briefly tell us why cryptocurrency is such a disaster?
Cryptocurrency is private. It's private and it's speculative.
It's not regulated.
And it's not regulated, yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's the short answer.
Yeah.
It's, people invest in cryptocurrency. That if you invest in it, then it's a commodity. And then you're dealing with a commodity rather than a utility. We're trying to think about what is a system that would enable people to facilitate exchange. It's not like kind of investing in a commodity in order to make more money. It's the whole concept doesn't align with, certainly with my vision, or with a vision that has anything to do with equity and access. Is that the answer you're hoping for?
I think it's horrific. What really shocks me is that there's a convenience store. I mean, I live in South Jersey. There's a convenience store close by, and there's a big banner saying, buy Bitcoin here. Absolutely horrific.
Well, it's all of a kind with, seducing people into buying stuff with the hope that it'll go up in value. It's like, doesn't have a lot to do with, certainly doesn't have a lot to do with common security, right?
Right. Do you think it ever will be mainstream from what, I mean, I can't, I'm not an economist, but you are.
Yeah. Well, it looks like it's getting increasing regulatory scrutiny. So I don't think it has legs as a solution. I mean, there's a lot of things that we're enduring that don't have legs as solutions. So I wouldn't say that it's going to die, but it's certainly, it may have reached its height. I don't know. I'm not an economist either. I just care about this.
You act like one. Yes.
Well,
I have a friend who decided during the pandemic that she was going to learn everything about economics, and she told me last night she read 35 books, and which is pretty good about economics, and now she's ready to start giving seminars. She's from Sudan.
Wow,
and
that's great.
She wants to start giving seminars to people, to women, about money.
That's really great. Yeah.
This is a huge empowering thing for women to be able to be financially independent.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I'm really interested in is demystifying economics and making it something that everybody can think about and has a right to think about. And I've thought a lot about the Quaker peace testimony. So we feel like we have a right to talk about peace, but there's State Department officials and there's generals who certainly have claimed that as their area of expertise. But we've decided that we can kind of step into that arena and say, we have some values and we have some beliefs, and we're willing to stand here and say what we believe, even if it doesn't fit with your, with the common wisdom. But with economics, it's really, really hard. The economists say, we've got this under control. We're the experts. It's really hard for you folks to understand, but don't worry, we've got it covered. And it's really easy for us to say, okay, it's kind of complicated, so I guess we'll let you do it. And we really need that other, perspective. We need the perspective that says, we know some things, we have some values, we're going to stand on those values, and we're going to enter into this conversation with our values intact. And we may not know all the really long terms, and we may not know all equations, but the values are important. And one thing that I always remember is so the Greek roots of the words economics are management of the home, management of the home. And that's something that we all know about. And we all feel capable of speaking to what makes for good management of a home. That's not obscure, and it's not hard to understand. So the economists have really tried to stake out a territory that's kind of doesn't have any values or morals to it. It's like science. They're trying to have a science like physics. But one of the things that happens there is that then you measure the things that are easily measurable, and you kind of push to the side the things that you can't quite fit into the system. I remember I was listening to a guy who was really very smart about debt, an economist. I was looking for economists to follow. And so he has a lot of really smart things to say about debt. And then he said, well, then there's this whole question about the climate crisis. And I can't really think about that at all. So that's out of my area of expertise. And I'm thinking, yeah, I can't follow this guy, if he can't even fit that kind of an issue into his thinking about economics. So yes, we get to step in. We get to just solidly say, this is what we know, and this is what we value, and this is where we stand, and this doesn't make sense. Hear you, Lois.
I think we do have to give the Fed some credit, because our country is having less than 10% inflation. I have a friend in Argentina. He says it's more than 70% inflation there. So they're doing something right here. They're not necessarily following all moral standards, but they're keeping us much more able to buy our groceries.
Having control of a sovereign currency makes a lot of difference. And so, yeah. I'm hesitant to step into that territory. That's challenging territory to step into.
Yeah.
I have a question. Pamela,
Hey.
you're writing the two books you are showing at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Are they available? Or?
Yes, I was thinking that I could give Lois some information on that she could add to the video, but I can put them up here again. This one is Money and Soul. It's part of the Quaker Quicks series, but if you just Google Pamela Haines, Money and Soul.
Oh, just Google your name. You get them through whatever that website from Quaker FGC, from FGC?
Well, probably it's there, yeah. Or you can go to Bookshop, which is a non-Amazon.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Bookshop.
Okay.
And the other one is Toward a Right Relationship with Finance.
Pamela,
I think you can just Google them.
could you email me the bookshop links, and I could add them
Thank you.
to the notes for this video?
Excuse me?
If you email me the bookshop links, I can add them to the notes.
That was what I was thinking. Yeah. And I can also put in my my website has all of that, and yeah, I can be shared easily. Yeah.
We have homework. Read your books. Okay.
I love it. And talk to people. Talk to people about economics. Practice talking about management of the home.
Right. Okay.
And practice talking about public, the right of the public to have its public money not under the control of private investment.
Whenever you introduce a third party, things go bad. It's like with healthcare too. It used to be you'd have a healer probably living in a convent, and someone would be sick and they'd go straight there and no one would take a cut.
Yeah, yeah,
And then, I mean, insurance, I mean, Medicare and Medicaid, obviously it's terrific, but it's a third party still. Yeah, I mean, it would be so much better if everyone had a decent amount of money and you didn't have to give part of it away to someone sitting in an office.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I think that we get to experiment with that. That's why I started this talking about investing, the non-monetary aspects of investment. And we all get to be able to do that. We get to be able to create, as much of our lives as we can in line with those visions, and then work on the parts that are terribly misaligned and are going to be really hard to change. But we can be clear about where we're reaching in any case.